Moving forward, let me introduce our next panel speaker for this session, Tina Govan. She is a licensed architect and principal of her own firm, Placemaking Studio in North Carolina. She holds a Master of Architecture from MIT. She is committed to igniting change from the bottom up and uncovering the hidden potential of undeserved people and places. Today, she will be talking about the powerful need for family-friendly urban places that offer children the opportunity to explore out of the doors on their own for their healthy development. So please welcome Tina Govan.
So as you said, thanks so much. I'm excited about the launch of Placemaking Nepal. I am an architect and placemaker here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I first started to develop my passion for child-friendly cities when I became a parent. And I wanted to say this, that as I've talked with my neighbors and just growing my kids here, parents are an untapped resource, that they are a innate placemaker because they've been transformed by becoming parents. They start seeing their cities and their environments through different eyes. They see what's missing. They see that their kids don't have a place to play, or they can't move across town safely. So if you want to push forward this kind of change in your community, tap the mothers and the fathers, because not only are they passionate and just innate placemakers, but they are ready for action, because childhood is fleeting and their kids are kids now and they want change now. And so they are about making immediate change. So I've just discovered that you can get amazing placemakers out of these parents. And when you make a city good for kids, you're really making it friendly to everyone. So I started documenting my kids playing in this creek across from their elementary school. The school that they went to was rather conservative. They weren't allowed to play very freely, but they would go across the street, throw their backpacks over their shoulders, take off their shoes, jump in the creek, make rafts, become creative, create their own world there. And the difference between being in the school and being in this creek was so phenomenal. And I started photo documenting it. So I made a little video about this set to the tune of Baba O'Reilly, which I'll put the link in the chat. It's about 5 minutes, but I don't have time to show it here. And it just shows how these kids grew up in downtown and went from exploring the creek to exploring the city. They'd collect pieces of glass and ceramic out of the creek, create mosaics, create their own little shops. They even printed creek money. So they made their own little society. And this experience really transformed them. As they grew up, they became advocates for the environment, became urban designers and adventurous sort of travelers throughout the world. So this was, I think, critical in their healthy development. This is a map of where the creek was across from the elementary school. And as they grew up, they began to realize that the rest of the city didn't offer them the opportunities that the creek did. They weren't allowed to explore. There was no place to play. They were being chased off one place after another. They couldn't climb the trees in the cemetery. The police would chase them off. Everything had no access and private ownership. And, as a parent, I became more frustrated. This is where my passion for child-friendly cities started to grow. So where can we go was the question. More and more these places were blocked off from them. They felt like basically refugees in their own town. And as they got into their teenage years and got into skateboarding, they were even more ostracized. There was no place to skateboard. There were no signs all over the city. And I think a lot of cities suffer from this, where they really are saying, no this, no that, no human life, no activity. And it's a problem, rather than saying yes and welcoming this and realizing this is what kids do. This is how people live. Let's embrace it. Let's integrate it into the city instead of trying to control it and exclude it. This is our downtown plaza. And just this kind of message gives a sense of, you're not welcome here. And there's a sense of fear, a kind of an attitude about you might hurt yourself. Be careful. up and down this walkway is just avoid injury, watch your step. And it's just, I think there could be a lot more mutual trust that cities can offer the public, and then the public will show up more. So my kids ended up climbing trees, trying to find places where they could go and be themselves, just constantly trying to rediscover and re-experience that creek experience that they had, that freedom and independence. They would go spelunking into the bottoms of buildings. They'd go skateboarding in parking decks at 3 a.m. I mean, not all of it was legal, but they had fun, and it was sort of insatiable thirst for adventure, and they found it despite being unwelcomed by the city to do it. So, I think if we want habitat for families and kids downtown, we have to create it. It's just like any other animal, it's a habitat. And so but their habitat was being squeezed by private development. Here's the Hampton Inn. They would string their hammocks wherever they could, but there was less and less space for them to do that, and they were constantly being chased off. So I really want to advocate for this kind of leftover space and this connection to nature that can be part of cities. And not really antiseptic or overly controlled or supervised, but the chance to build these kinds of forts and to be messy and to explore nature and the world around you. And too often, these are the kinds of playgrounds that are being offered. They're safe, and we can see the kids, but the kids don't really want to play there. They don't really invite play. And I think that we default too much to this kind of environment. These friends of my sons, they, even when they went into college, they couldn't get this out of their blood. They're still making forts in bamboo forests and digging pits and climbing trees. So this is really, I think, innate and part of childhood, and to be embraced. So whether you live in New York or you live in Raleigh, North Carolina, this kind of connection to nature and being able to explore nature, even in the middle of the city, I think is critical to the healthy development of kids. But again, I think we end up with making playgrounds like this. And part of that's due to playground regulations and fear of injury and liability. But this is not a place to play. And this is not a place where kids can explore and take risks. This is from Tim Gill's book. But I'm encouraged by some of the playgrounds I'm seeing pop up lately, where more loose parks and natural landscapes. And these shots from Germany and Copenhagen, where it's becoming more integrated into nature and less antiseptic, and allowing, again, kids to take risks, and they learn by doing that. We can't, protect them from everything, because the world is not going to be like that when they grow up. So I think, here, this is in the middle of Copenhagen. So this is not something that has to happen out in the suburbs or out in a park somewhere. It can be right in the middle of the city. And I think one of the problems we suffer from in the US is that when you have kids, the conventional wisdom is that you move to the suburbs and you go on the outskirts of town, and that the city center is not for kids. And I think that needs to change. We can incorporate this kind of creek environment in the middle of the city. It'd be good for not only children, but for all of us, not to have it so segregated, and to allow kids to get messy and say, that's okay. Play in the mud, explore. Maybe some of us should do that too. So this is, I think, a powerful map that I got from Tim Gill. And this sort of kidney shape is showing back in 1919, the range of a child who was allowed to walk 6 miles to go fishing. And then in 1950, that great-grandfather's son was only allowed to walk about 1 mile. And then his daughter in 1979 was only allowed to walk half a mile. And then today, kids barely get out of their houses. So the shrinking world of kids that's being limited not only by places to go, but also by the fear of parents. And so there's this mutually reinforcing mistrust between parents and the outside world, and cities not welcoming kids. And I think we need to shift that. So, the other question that's come up in cities often, in Raleigh, this is definitely an issue, is that what can kids do there? The activities are very limited. It's mainly for 30 and 40 somethings who are drinking beer, which is just not a great spectator sport, or, watching people drink beer is not that interesting. And also they can't go into restaurants. They can't, and this isn't for them, obviously. So trying to integrate activities that are more active, that include kids, that are for kids. And in Raleigh, we had this little leftover plaza here that we temporarily used for a ice skating rink. And suddenly we saw kids and families coming downtown. It was wonderful. We had ice hockey games. And so it attracted a whole different kind of crowd into the city. But unfortunately, that was just temporary. And now a building is under construction. So we lost that to construction. So I think the message here is that we need to leave space for kids. We need space for this kind of activity, and that maybe having it change over time. It could be an ice skating rink during part of the year, or it could be basketball another part of the year, or yoga. But to have everything sold off to developers and developed for money is a mistake. So when we went to Greece, what I was really struck by was you would go out at night, you eat at a restaurant, have drinks, and then there'd be a plaza next door where kids are playing all kinds of things, soccer, doing all kinds of stuff right up against the restaurants, so that it's integrated, it's not separated. You don't leave the kids home with a babysitter. They're out with the parents. The whole family goes out. And in that way, the whole city meets itself, young and old, everyone is meeting out at night. So this kind of friendly integration, I think, is something we need to foster. And we went on a visit to Turkey. We ate by in this restaurant that had a field next to it, and these are my kids playing soccer with some Turkish boys there that they met. They invited them to come out and play, and we were just visiting as tourists. And this is a very strong memory for them. They played all night with these kids in the field while we were eating dinner, and then the next day at the farmers market, they were high-fiving each other. So they made this connection that never would have happened if this kind of thing wasn't going on in the city. So you see examples of this, say like the West 4th Street Cage in New York, where when you have something besides eating and drinking, when you have sports, people come together. A diverse crowd comes together. People mix. Old people like to watch young people play because they can't do it anymore. So this kind of diversity is really needed in our cities. Sometimes you don't have a 4th Street Cage. Sometimes you have to take it to the streets, which is also fine. It's like Ethan was saying, sometimes it's not a matter of designing a special place. You just sort of love the one you're with. You use the space you got, as he used to do. We used to take over the streets and play. And I think that's sort of becoming revitalized, closing off streets, letting kids come out, because this is the most accessible public space to a lot of people, is the street in front of their homes, in front of their businesses. This was a play street that we did last weekend, and just closing off the street, it's amazing the life that comes out. And suddenly you've got all kinds of meeting and fun and play happening just right on the street. Here, this is Mike Lanzo. He started Playborhood, and he was so frustrated at not having a park or place for his kids to play that he just turned his front yard and driveway into a playground and invited, the neighbors over. And so all summer long, he has this as sort of a public park right in front of his house. So you can just transform the places around you by inviting others and making places to play. And how about just like incorporating skateboarding into downtown? Let's use these places under underpasses. Let's acknowledge the fact that kids skateboard, that this is a culture and something they love, and let's make places for it. And water, to go into downtown Chicago and see this kind of environment where kids are, half naked, playing, running around, squealing, right among the skyscrapers is such a refreshing place to be, and so relaxing to see kids loosening up and having fun. It's good for adults too, rather than just walking among skyscrapers with no interaction. So this is in downtown Chattanooga, where my kids are playing in a fountain right on the main street. So again, this juxtaposition of kids playing in downtown urban environments, and then it makes them more comfortable in the city, makes them feel welcome, making a place for them. Water is always welcome. And it's therapeutic for us to see kids, people playing. This is New Orleans, where they routinely offer kids the chance to perform. So kids, then they feel like they're really being welcomed by the city. They're being seen by people. They're able to perform and entertain and feel ownership in their city. I think this is key. And so I've done this here in Raleigh, North Carolina, where we just go to a shopping center and have a concert. But what I've discovered is when you have kids perform, it's a great way to connect with all kinds of people. The kids ask their friends, the friends ask their parents, the parents ask their friends, and suddenly you've got a huge crowd just via families and kids. So you can immediately connect to a wide group of people by involving kids and making them the performers. And this is also an issue, how do we get there? In car-oriented cities is we don't design for people who can't move around by car. So we need, of course, to weave these kinds of connections in every city that are car-free, that are for bikes, that are safe, and allow kids the mobility and the independence. So if they have this independence to be able to explore cities on their own and neighborhoods on their own, they're going to feel more confident and more, they're going to love their place more. They're going to be more open to meeting new people rather than feeling afraid and having to be driven and to be isolated from this kind of interaction. So when we give kids this kind of freedom, it has enormous repercussions. Exploring on their own, and not just kids, but other people, older people, people who can't afford cars. And this kind of scene where you're in the middle of New York and you see kids out on scooters, it's a wonderful thing to see. It's like a diverse ecosystem to see all kids. This is a place where in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where we've got the highway cutting through town, but then they were able to weave bike paths and walking paths that are accessible to others under and around that. So they have the same kind of mobility through the city, but just in a different way. So we can do this. So I really would like to advocate for meeting places for all of us, places where we all have the freedom to come together. This is a Zocalo in Mexico, where we can see each other, where old folks aren't in old folks' homes and kids aren't in the suburbs or relegated off to some rec center outside of town, but that the city is the place where we can meet. And as Enrique Peñalosa says, children are a kind of indicator species. If we can build a successful city for children, we will have a successful city for all people. And I really believe this is true. It's accessible and friendly to everyone. And if you go to Washington Square Park, you can see the kind of diversity of life that happens there, where you have kids playing, adults dancing, people playing chess and other games, jumping in the fountain, and all of it's happening together. It's all happening simultaneously, and everyone's mixing and enjoying each other. I feel like my kids had this opportunity a bit in Raleigh, that because they were exploring downtown, even though they weren't necessarily welcomed there, they met all kinds of people that they would not have met if they just stayed in their own neighborhoods or been out isolated in the suburbs where they had to be driven everywhere. They were out on their own exploring, and they've benefited from it. Like I say, they've all grown up to become urban designers, environmental scientists, landscape architects. So they care about where they live, and they are stewards of their environment, I think, because of their childhood. So I wanted to ask you to check out, there's a video, I'll put it in the chat, of this interview, which sort of hits the points with Tim Gill of this wonderful book that I suggest you look at, called The Urban Playground: How Child-Friendly Planning and Design Can Save Cities. And he offers examples from around the world of how cities have incorporated child-friendly strategies and spaces, have made space for children, and the advantages of that and how to get it started in your own town and build advocacy. So he's got this great new book that was recently published, and I strongly suggest you looking at it. I'll put the link to our conversation in the chat. And then this was another kind of recent initiative that I was doing with Placemaking US, which is asking kids how they would remake their city. And this is an easy way to get feedback from kids. We just ask them to submit short videos with them talking about what they feel is missing from their cities. And it was amazing to hear what they had to say and what frustrated them, and just allowing them to be seen and feel like they're being heard, which they often aren't. So thanks very much. And that's it for me. I will put these links to these videos in the chat and hope that you get a chance to check them out.